say, I don't have anything. Get something. Get the treasure inside of you. Build up the treasure inside of you. Spend a little time every day growing as a person. And one of the most important things you can do, you can serve people, but if you don't build yourself up, if you're not reading the books, listening to the podcasts, spending the time in prayer, developing yourself the way you know you're supposed to develop yourself, life won't get better. Today I want to talk about success and the way in which the world defines success, the way in which God defines success, and the way in which we define success. If you go to someone today and you say, he's successful, here's one definition, what does that mean? It means cheddar, right? It means they're kind of wealthy, right? Success means he's got some money. But that could be a problem as a measurement of real success in life. We all know the Ebenezer Scrooges of the world, right? People who have the money but no joy. They have the car, but they're not going anywhere. Yeah, we all know what that looks like. And yet at the same time, we believe that we live in God's kingdom, a kingdom of abundance, of achievement, of dreams, of creativity, of overflowing. So which is it? How many celebrities do we have to see? How many stories do we have to hear of people that say, fame is a little bit like drugs. Once you've got it, you know it's killing you, but you can't live without it. Don't get it. Don't catch it. But we also believe God doesn't want us to be a wallflower. God wants us to make an impact in this world. God certainly doesn't want you to be a doormat. He wants you to be a world changer. He wants you to have a major impact on your family and on your community. We all believe that. But that certainly would be a status thing, right? So what is it? Which is it? You know, in fact, Jesus tells us, he asks his disciples, who here wants to be the greatest? I have an answer for you. If you really want to be the greatest ever, you must serve everyone. Well, that's a clue, isn't it? Herein lies the clue. Good things become wonderful things when they're in second place. Second place, not first. Second place means you'll miss it, but you can get along without it, without the status, without the money. Second place means you want the Lord more than any other treasure in this world. Second place means you want Jesus to be famous, and you want his way to be famous in the world more than you to be famous. And that leads us to the title of today's thinking. I want to call this a picture of two versions of success. Here's king number one, famous guy from the Roman Empire, Herod, king of the Jews. Only one problem with Herod, king of the Jews. He's not Jewish. Isn't that interesting? Yes, he marries a Jewish princess, a Maccabean princess, later strangles her to death. He is insecure. He kills 3 of his sons, murders them, kills his brother-in-law. One of the reasons why the Sadducees in Jesus' time seem so awful and so pro-Roman is in Herod's day, they didn't like Herod. And so Herod rounded up all of the powerful and very faithful Sadducees that were serving in the temple, and he had them all killed and replaced with pro-Roman Sadducees. And he just was completely insecure, hungry for power. He came to power because his dad, Antipater, saved Julius Caesar in Egypt at the siege of Alexandria. And so Julius Caesar gave his dad, Antipater, a bunch of land and title. Herod inherits the land and title. And Rome says, Herod is the king of the Jews. And somebody says, he's not Jewish. He says, he's Italy and it's close enough. They won't care. He's really famous for being a great builder. If you go to Israel, you'll see all of these buildings. The first is the most famous thing he built was the temple. Incredible. Built that whole thing. The second was a famous fortress he was using to keep Cleopatra, another famous ruler of the time, from invading the southern part of Israel. It's called Masada. We were there last year, you might remember. He built this beautiful city in honor of his friend Caesar called Caesarea Maritime. Beautiful ocean community. And most importantly, in this story, he built what's called the Herodian, after his own name, a palace on a hill gorgeous fortress palace. It's not so beautiful anymore, but it was back in its day, trust me. And this place, the Herodian, was only 3 miles from Bethlehem. And in fact, Bethlehem was a very small little village in that day. You could see Bethlehem on a dark and moonless night. You could see it right there and look right down on it. Herod, the king of the Jews. It said that when Herod died, he was so reviled that he was on his deathbed and he rounded up the most popular nobles of the land, had them imprisoned, and the order was to be given that when he died, they would all be executed so that people would weep and not celebrate. And then he died, and they let all the rulers free, and everybody celebrated. Herod's dead! King number 1. Here's king number 2, 3, and 4. We call them the Magi. We think of the Magi as the 3 kings because they brought 3 gifts. And here's a better way to think of the Magi. There was actually a troop, a large parade or group of traveling magicians or wizards. The word Magi is where we get the word magic from. And that's exactly how they would have been seen. It's like weird wizards from the Orient, from the Far East, from the Persian Empire, somewhere, maybe Arabia, maybe India. I've made a claim in the past, I don't have time to make it today, that they were actually Jewish. In Jesus' day, Babylonia, which was a part of the Persian Empire at the time, still had more Jews in it than Israel did from the Babylonian exile. And many of them were going back and forth between Babylonia and Israel in the same way today someone from Russia or New York might go back and forth from Israel. And so these men, they followed a star, as we know, and they came into Jerusalem. And now when they came to Jerusalem, it wasn't 3 dudes on camels. It was a giant group. There would have been soldiers to protect them. There would have been servants to cook the food. There might have even been some animals. And just think of a large parade. This is what happens when you have weeks or months of travel to get across a desert. And they enter into Jerusalem. Nobody knows they're coming. The doors open, and picture the scene, Prince Ali, Happy as He from Aladdin. Very similar. Everybody lines up the streets. They're wondering what's going on. They come through. They go to the governor or some important place, and they say to him, roll up a scroll, we have come, we have followed a star because we heard that the King of the Jews has been born, and we've come to worship him. Well, who's the King of the Jews? We just said it. Herod. And can we say Herod does not like competition? He does not like a threat to his power. These Magi do not know it, but they are in mortal danger. Major, major danger. And in fact, immediately when Herod hears this, it says all of Jerusalem was in an uproar, and Herod was in an uproar, and he invites them to come up, we assume, to the Herodian, this building I just showed you. So they're just a couple miles from Bethlehem now. They go, kind of south from Jerusalem, just a few miles, to the Herodian. They go up into this palace. They tell him everything. And he says, we know where this Messiah is to be born. The prophets say he's born in Bethlehem. That's where the Messiah will be born. And he says, when you find him, please let me know so that I can go and worship him too. Right? And they say, okay. Now when they arrive, of course, they continue to follow the star. They find the house. They find Jesus. And you can imagine a major party breaks out. Not only have they brought the equivalent of lots of valuable items today we would think of as a sum of a large amount of money, not just the gold, but the frankincense and myrrh, all very, very valuable. But in this sort of Middle Eastern style, there would have been probably days of celebrating and singing and music, and Bethlehem would have been a big party. And Herod wasn't there, nor was he told later where to find the baby Jesus. And what we see here is a story of two versions of success. Because like Herod, we can say the Magi were probably famous. They were certainly wealthy. They were certainly successful and well-to-do, but they were under God's blessing. They were at the party. They were giving and not taking. They were not threatened, but were blessing those who were around them. And we can clearly say, I think every person in this room, that though we don't know of any buildings that they made, everybody knows the Magi, the 3 kings, more than Herod. More people are talking about them. More people have a bigger impact from them because their success was under God. And so the question I want to ask today is, how do we become like these magi if we want to be successful people instead of turning into this rotten to the core, horrible person like Herod? And the answer is so simple, and you will probably forget this answer, but if you remember it, it will change your life, and that is, very simply, follow God. In all you do, follow God. Follow God. In all your ways, acknowledge Him, and He'll make your path straight. That's what the Magi were doing when they followed the star. They weren't just following a star, they were following God. The star was God's way of leading them where to go. The star is a symbol for God's direction for you. His name is Jesus Christ, King of Kings, Lord of Lords. That's King number 5, in case you were wondering. And that's the first thing that we ought to know about building a big dream in God's kingdom. Number 1, it's about Jesus and His vision for your life. If your dream is like this, it's probably from God. If you want to help and not harm, if you want to give and not take, if you want to lift up and not tear down, if your dream exists to serve and not to be served. And by the way, did you know that's the ultimate formula for success, by the way, is to serve others? It's the impact of your service. And this is what I want you to hear. The greater impact of your service, the brighter your future. The word here to focus on is not service. The word here to focus on is impact. All of us want to serve others. All of us want to help others. But when your service makes an impact, when it touches a life, when it changes a mind, when it motivates a person, when it builds a product or a thing that really serves another person, then your future gets brighter. That God's coming alongside you to get the job done. That God's helping you create all that you were called to make. And it helps you see what God is like. What is God like? He's a God of victory and not defeat. A God of life and not of death. He's a God of abundance and not lack. So here's what Dr. Schuller said. Make sure your dreams are big enough for God to fit in. That is right. That is right. And by the way, a big team is not just a number thing, it means big people on your team. That when you have a team full of big people, everything gets better. And that brings me to my third point. How do we do these big dreams? We get around big dreamers. You got to do this. That the people you're around are going to affect your faith. They're going to affect your achievement. They're going to affect your mindset. We want to get around big dreamers. We want to get around positive people. We want to get around people full of faith and vision. We want to get around anything is possible kind of people. Can we just say, one thing we can say that about the Magi is that they weren't alone? Herod was alone. And anytime somebody got close to him, he killed him. The Magi were not alone. And I don't believe crossing 1,500 miles of desert in the first century was an easy thing to do. You know, there had to be days when they were hot or thirsty or wanted to go home where they said, this is stupid. Why are we following a stupid star? Who is this guy again? I'm sure that happened. But Belshazzar or one of the 3 kings said, no, we're still going. If you're building a dream, you're building a team. And you've got to recognize that the people around you are going to help you get through those tough times. And boy, you're going to go through tough times. Jesus tells us plainly, storm is always coming. To not expect it is to be naive. So how do we prepare for a storm? How do we build our life on the rock? Other than following Jesus' teaching, we surround ourselves with the kind of people that are going to help us get through those tough times. And you get those kind of people at this church, I believe, and welcome to Shepherd's Grove. We're glad you're here. My grandpa had a great team. You know, did you know this? I think it was, wish Jim Dawson was here last service, because I believe it was John Crean, and now he can confirm for me. The first $1 million that was given to the Crystal, was that John and Linda Crean? It was, okay. So John Crean gives $1 million to my grandpa for this vision to build what many consider the most important church building in America. 10,000 windows, a crystal cathedral, incredible vision. And he's trying to raise money to build this thing. He doesn't want to borrow money, he wants to pay cash for it. Can't raise the money. He's got his $1 million, but nobody else seems to want to give. Finally, he realized the dream is over. He calls John Crean. He says, Mr. Crean, I'm so sorry. I need to send you your $1 million back. And John Crean says, well, what do you mean? He says, nobody believes in this. Nobody's giving to this. And he says, John Crean says, well, surely you can do something with $1 million. And he says, what? He goes, well, can you do something with $1 million? He says, I suppose I could dig a hole. He goes, dig a hole. Dig $1 million hole. My grandpa digs a hole, $1 million hole. And people begin, all the reporters come out, the cameras, the newspapers. Dr. Schuller's building a 10,000 glass building. And people begin to give. People say, wow, he's really doing it. The cranes are out. The shovels are digging. And it happened. Can you believe he was that close to giving up? The thing that carried him through was one guy saying, dig a hole. One guy. This is the importance of the people in your life, surrounding yourself with dreamers, achievers, people who lift you up and don't tear you down. Number 4, when your dream becomes clear, it becomes a goal, and you have gotten one step closer to a brand new life. It's interesting when you think about what the Magi did. What did they say? They said, we just follow a star. It's super clear. I wondered, I don't even know if they knew they were going to Israel. That's just the way the star was going, right? They're like, oh, it's going there, let's go, here we go, here goes the star, we gotta follow it, right? Here goes the star. And then they'll be like, oh, it's going that way, time to go, let's go, time to go. And think about how very often when it was clear about what you were supposed to do and what you were supposed to achieve, how much easier things became in whatever task it was that you were doing. Have a goal in your life, make it clear. The clearer, the better. And number 5, that's the last one. The Magi, hey, look, they had something to give. They had a real treasure. They weren't just there to worship, they were there to give something. Have something to give the world. You say, I don't have anything. Get something. Get the treasure inside of you. Build up the treasure inside of you. Spend a little time every day growing as a person. And one of the most important things you can do, you can serve people, but if you don't build yourself up, if you're not reading the books, listening to the podcast, spending the time in prayer, developing yourself the way you know you're supposed to develop yourself, life won't get better. Life does not get better when we blame others. Life does not get better when we blame our political parties, or our government, or our leaders, or our schools, or a boss, or our work, or a spouse, or a family. Life does not get better when they get better. Life gets better when I get better. Life gets better when you get better. And that happens when you develop yourself. In the church, we call it discipleship. Develop yourself every day. Spend 20 minutes, an hour, whatever it is, every day to get this treasure inside of you. Paul says we have this treasure in earthen vessels so that we can show that the power is not from us, but it's from God. That's why we develop the power inside of us. It reveals to the world what God can do in an everyday person like you and me. Amen. Would you stand with me? Welcome to our Dutch YouTube channel. Here you'll find new videos and shorts each week. So remember to subscribe to stay up to date and hit the like button. Friend, make it a great day.